Well, thank you, Doug, and please, again, advise me of my volume, if you would. Unfortunately, where I live, I don't have the best phone connection. I don't use a microphone. I'm using a normal telephone. Looking to remedy that, but so if I'm too loud, just go ahead and tell me that I'm coming in too hot. I think tonight is a critical night because as we go into the Jade Helm 15, as we go into the overwhelming world trends that are doing an end to the United States dollar, what we're going to talk about tonight, and Ross has worked for two of the biggest banks in the world, intimately aware, obviously his contacts are still strategically placed. And I asked Ross when we would come on tonight, I said, Ross, I want to deal with these cyber attacks that are ongoing, and I want you to explain to people that people can have, it doesn't matter the technology that's out there, you can have the best firewalls, the best encryption, but if you've got somebody that's on the inside that can take down the whole system, and they know, the big five know this, then the vulnerability increases by magnitudes. So, Ross, if you would, tonight, can we just start and take your time, take your liberty, and talk about, obviously, the cyber attacks that are ongoing, the DNS attacks, and what it means to the person that may not understand how vulnerable they are. So, Ross, thank you for coming on tonight, and please take your liberty.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Yes, you were right on. Most of the large banks, and the two ones that I have worked at previously, and I have large contacts with them inside the bank still, are telling me that the denial of service attacks are happening every day. Last weekend especially was horrendous. Many people, I'm not going to mention the bank, but many people have probably witnessed that when they couldn't log into their online accounts. And these attacks are coming from overseas. They're also coming through domestic sites which are using proxies, and they're spoofing. So there's no way really to trace them. Fortunately, many of these banks have really upgraded their cybersecurity so that they can't break in from the outside, and that's led them to have a new tactic from the hackers. And these hackers are Iranians, they are ISIS people, maybe Russians, maybe the Chinese, but they're all hell-bent on bringing our economic system down, but starting with our banking, so that if you can't use your debit card or your credit card or your ATM card, you can't eat. And many Americans don't have more than 2 or 3 days of food in their houses. So what they're trying to do is make it where you can't get to your accounts, you can't actually access your money. And so right now, the latest strategy that I was told is just as recently as the day before yesterday, again, is that these denial of service attacks are sort of a smokescreen to sort of a misdirected play. If anybody knows football, misdirection, that they're convinced that the IT directors that I talk to and across the entire litany of banks, whether they're the top five or they're mid-tier, second tier, even regional banks, could have moles in them, and they know that they're there. They can feel it, they can sense it, and they can see some things that have been done. So what these moles have been hired, they've been vetted by their background checks, and right now many of the banks are actually re-vetting critical personnel to go back and dig even further, because many times it's a shell of them to make sure that you haven't stolen or you haven't been jailed or things like any kind of fiduciary crimes, and you can get in, or you don't have really bad credit. Those kind of things is what they look for. But now they're going back and to look and see what schools you went to, what kind of background you may have had. And because the whole consensus of a consortium of banks, that's the ones, all the top five, all the second tiers, all believe that there are moles inside their organizations that are working in concert to create portals within these infrastructure inside the walls that allow hackers to get through. They could leave something open in their computer. They could IP in. They could do a lot of things where they get inside the walls and do damage that way to shut down your access, as well as try to steal money. I mean, that's billions of dollars have been stolen already, but they're also trying to deny service to you, to having access to your money. So they know it's there. The feds are involved. The bank security is involved, and they're trying to flush these people out. But again, it's a war of attrition, even inside, whether it's on the battlefield or whether it's in money or in the economic world. The battle of attrition is here, and so we all need to be diligent and vigilant on as we look at our accounts. And so I have a whole list of things that I could recommend folks they can do. But Steve, that's where the set of it is, and so it's really immediate. The people need to recognize that the whole banking system is on the bubble and under a constant attack. So the chances of a cyber 9/11 or a Pearl Harbor of the banking system is very real, and people need to be cognizant of that.
Go ahead and give your top 3 suggestions right out of the chute, Ross, because again, I don't personally do online banking for that very reason. I just had my American Express card compromised over the weekend, and had to get a whole new card, had to notify some of the people that have my card on file that it had been breached. So I don't use in any way, shape, or form online banking. If people are doing it, they say, do they recommend, or do I recommend it? Absolutely not. I'm saying that. But for those of you who do, go ahead, Ross, and give your 3 points to that would indicate that someone's got issues and problems. And we're going to talk in the second hour about everything people can do, but I think in the first hour it's critical, Doug, that we lay out all of the events transpiring so that people don't have to worry about getting an alert. We're trying to give enough data. We're trying to give enough understanding to everyone so they'll know when it's on themselves. So go ahead, Rod. Talk about, login, all the stuff that, you would recommend people do just as this thing is underway. And my understanding in emailing you and talking to you on the phone is that basically the DNS, denial of service attacks, have increased dramatically. Is that not the case?
Oh, very much so. And they do, on the weekends when the staffing is lower, they know the bank staffing is lower, so they just pound the banks over the weekend, starting on a Friday afternoon and all the way through Monday mornings, and then off and on over the course of the week. So it's just, you'll be calm, and then suddenly there'll just be a flash of them, and you can just see it and they can trace where it's coming from, but recognizing that some are spoofed. But having said that, the normal user, many of your people use online banking, and I do myself, but there's some precautions you should make. And having real-time access to see what your balances are and what's cleared and things is a great technology. You just have to be able to safely use it, and I'm going to tell you how to do that right now. So everybody that has a login account or online account with whether it's Chase or BO, Bank of America or Wells Fargo or Cap One or BB&T, whoever it may be across the country. And even if you're overseas, you have the same capability, whether you're in the UK or whether you're in Australia or wherever you're from. You need to log into your account daily, at least once every day, just to look at your balance, make sure it doesn't look out of whack, and then you see changes from day to day. And having said that, if you see something that suddenly you had $10,000 in an account and suddenly it's at 9, you need to find out why that's happening. And because if you don't do that, you may go a week or two, and it may go from 10 to 9 to 8 to 7 if nobody's raising a flag. People are going to continue to siphon it off. So everybody needs to look at their online account every day. And having said that, you need to change your password frequently, and you need to make it, even though you maybe have to write it down inside your home, you need to make it so that's not something somebody could figure out easily. You need to include upper and lowercase letters. You need to include special characters. You almost make it like it's gobbledygook, so that it can't be just suddenly it's not your child's name plus 2 numbers, or it's not your wedding anniversary or anything like that. You need to make sure that it's as convoluted as possible, and of course you probably have to write it down. You won't be able to remember it, but you need to do that so that somebody else can't figure it out. But I'm bigger concerned from somebody actually getting a hold of your credentials is from the inside and the money getting siphoned off without the bank knowing it. So they have a lot of things in place, and I have to give them some credit because they do have a lot of security, and it's on top of the heads of everybody in the banks, because if money gets siphoned off of your account without them knowing it, they're on the hook for it. So check your account every day, at least a quick scan in the morning or in the evening, whichever you want to do, just to make sure that it looks right. Then if you receive notices from the bank by email, or if you get a voicemail or a text saying your things have been compromised, you need to call the bank and make sure. Many times if you're doing some transactions with your debit card or your credit card, you may get a notice saying, please call us because we think there's some fraudulent accounts. If they give you the bank number, then you should respond to that. If they tell you, well, you need to log into this website and give us all your information, you need to know that somebody is phishing. That's with a PH. Someone's phishing for your information, and you don't want to ever do that. So if you have any questions on your balance or you get some kind of email or text, you need to notify your bank right away that you're getting phished, and then they can trace that down as well. And finally, this is just a personal preference, but everybody needs to keep some cash on them at all times. Don't rely on your debit card or your credit card to get you wherever you're going to go. Because if this cyber 9/11 actually happens, you won't be able to use your debit card or your credit card or any of those things. Most stores won't be able to take cash only, and which is ironic since the powers that be are trying to get cash out of our system. So, but just recognize you need to have a minimum of that to fill your tank, put your car with gas, buy a bag of groceries, get milk, things like that. I'm not going to tell you how much I keep in my house simply for security purposes, but you need to keep at least a couple $100 probably if you can afford it. If it's only 20, more power to you, just as long as you have enough to take care of your family during this outage. And the outage could last 4 hours, the outage could last 8 hours, and if they have their way, it could last days and weeks. So that's where the state of where we are today, and everybody just has to be due diligent for themselves as well as their neighbors. And actually, if something does go down like this and your neighbor is wanting, I would suggest that you would help them out. So again, it's coming, it's there. You just need to be prepared, just like you are for hurricane season or something like that. You just need to be ready.
Ross, Steve, if I can ask this question, Ross.
Sure.
Who exactly is the enemy inside the gate? In other words, the mole inside the bank. Is this a cabal or a consortium of foreign nationals, or is this globalists, or can you identify for me the enemy?
From my sources, it's generally terrorist organizations that have created what used to be called back in the 60s sleeper cells. I mean, those things still exist, and people are groomed to get inside here to get hired, and then they work their way up and they get the access that they need. And so many people believe they are terrorist organizations that are trying to make a big deal. I mean, even ISIS bragged online that they were going to have a cyber attack in London, and they're going to be doing some other things around the world. So, but you have those groups, but you also have some anarchists that are, anonymous, and a few others that want to expose things and prove their power. So who the exact enemy is, it could be a litany of different folks. It could be even retaliation from North Korea. It could be Iranians messing with us. It could be the Russians, the Chinese. But generally they have a footprint that our security services can figure out, and they've, through diplomatic channels, work through that. But these rogue groups of terrorists like ISIS and others have loyalty to no one except themselves, and so they try to recruit people to get inside and try to break in. So
Understood.
If the head of IT for one large commercial bank, consumer bank I'm affiliated with, that I know of, the person, if he's that concerned, then I know, and he doesn't get rattled very easily. He's seen a lot of stuff. And if he's concerned, then we all should be concerned.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I want to take it one step further. I think that most people need to understand that this is the plot, the plan, the blueprint for the communist, and I'm saying the word, communist overthrow and revolution in the United States. I would say this, that if you understand that every terrorist organization is funded and controlled by someone, then it goes deeper than just, the Russian mafia or whatever. The idea of bringing this country to its knees financially is one of the prerequisites that is driving Jade Helm now. But remember this, when, who was it, Doug, that said, never let a good crisis go to waste? Was that Rahm Emanuel?
Yes, sir.
I believe it was. But here's what, again, people, we're praying we get through tonight. The idea of crashing the cyber systems, the security systems, and everything else, the A doesn't know what B does. The bankers sometimes are kept out of the loop because the world's elite operate on a basis of pretty much staying hidden. The main names are not just, quote, the ones everybody wants to blame, but there is a secret cabal of what I call the Egyptian Brotherhood / priesthood. I'm talking about guys that I do not believe are just normal. I believe there's a supernatural element to it. So understand this. In the New World Order's scheme of things in their blueprint, they have a motto, order ad chaos. If you lock out everyone out of their accounts, I'm just going to ask everyone to think about it. Think about what you would do if tonight were Friday, or even tonight's Wednesday? Well, are we Wednesday or Thursday yet? We're Wednesday. And tomorrow you went to your online banking, And again, I want to make clear, I don't use it. I'm just saying I'm trying to be consistent with my position. A convenience is, I believe, the ultimate bait for the ultimate trap. So I'll just make that statement and go on. Imagine you go to your account if it's online, or you go on the headline news or wherever you get your news, Drudge front page. The United States undergoes massive cyber attack, banks shut down, or banks undergoing massive cyber attack. Well, obviously, everybody's going to run to their bank as quickly as possible. Now, the golden rule that I have used in providing survival advice and prepper advice, is you want to be where everyone else isn't. In order to deal with risk, you have to deal with the area that you're most vulnerable in first and foremost. And I would say that the area that everyone is first and foremost most vulnerable in is basically their financial wherewithal or lack thereof. The idea that a cyber attack, we've already been told, and Ross, you've laid that out, and we've talked about that before, we'll address it a little later, but as the people who are in the IT departments are doing their best to keep out, let's say, the left-hand guys, the right-hand guys are controlled by the world's most powerful people, and they've got back doors that people don't even know exist. So the idea is this, that terrorism is funded by the people in the shadows. The people in the shadows want to abscond with everyone's finances. By absconding with everyone's finances, they then therefore throw this country into a state, a fit, an upheaval. And one of the things that people don't understand, I think, Ross, you need to really spell this out for people. After the first of the year, we have moved from a nation of banking where when you put your money in the bank, it was your money. And if that bank failed, the FDIC would cover it, or the bank that the FDIC would set up to buy out the failing bank would cover it. That no longer exists due to all of the new laws passed after the first year. And let me give you a simple illustration, and Ross, I want you to address it. If there are 100 people, and each one of them have $1 million in their account, so that's $100 million, and the bank uses that $100 million and loses $50 million, each one of those 100 depositors is now responsible for the loss. As you've seen the war on cash, it's also taking place from the standpoint of you're going to have to pay the bankers to put your money in their bank. What's wrong with that picture? So, Ross, based on what you know, what is wrong with that? Because the point being is they have redefined the difference between a secured depositor and an unsecured lender. You better make it, if you would, clear to people that that's a big deal.
Absolutely it is. I mean, the Dodd-Frank legislation is called the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, H.R. 4173, back in 2010, changed a lot of rules. I mean, some of the legislation was good for protecting consumers. However, it changed the definition of what a depositor is. And your bank of your parents and your grandparents and their parents, and even us, I'm not going to say my age, but even us into the 80s and 90s, a depositor was where you put your money in the bank. It's for safe there. Nobody's going to rob you, and you made some interest on your savings account and your checking account. You were a depositor. The bank took your money in, they loaned it out to other people, and they paid interest, and the bank made money on that spread. Today, the banks are so into risk in the derivatives and subprime loans and all of these very risky, high-stake types of investments in order to increase their bottom lines, because the feds have started squeezing the way that you can collect fees and things of that nature. So the bank is looking for new ways to make money, and so it's not a neighborhood goodwill. A bank is not a neighborhood goodwill person. They are there to make money and make lots of it for their stockholders. So with the Dodd-Frank legislation, the left hand was shaking at you as the shiny object to say, look, we're going to protect you. Look at all these new consumer protections. The right hand was sticking their hand in their pocket and saying, oh, guess what? You're not a depositor. You are a unsecured creditor to the bank, which means that you are subjugated below the higher statured or people that are higher on the food chain within the investment banking world. So the whole idea, many people have heard of the word bail-in. That bail-in, you might as well put bail-in Powell or bail-in Quayle or bail-in Hagman, because that's you. And they will give everybody a haircut of a certain percentage, as the people in Cyprus, as the people in Iceland, as the people in Greece. They're all seeing that they're getting these haircuts, and it ranges between 10 and 20%. And so one day you have $1,000 in your savings account, and suddenly you have $900 because you had to help keep the bank solvent. And the FDIC does not have the money to cover all of these banking losses. So they're spreading the risk and spreading the loss to the people that are putting their money in the bank. Am I saying you should pull every dollar out of the bank? I don't know if you could exist that way, especially with the way the laws are coming in the future with cash and how much is being looked upon under over $2,000, and they look at you like you're a criminal. So you need to somehow balance that, and hopefully tonight we can share some strategies to help you with that. But at the end of the day, and after a long answer, Steve, the Dodd-Frank Reform Act made everybody creditors and not depositors, so everybody's on the hook for their bank's losses.
And Steve, if I can just take this one step further.
Yeah, absolutely, Doug.
I was doing, Ross, I was doing some research on this today, okay, and basically it's my understanding that the Dodd-Frank Act did, in fact, made those changes. The changes came into play at the beginning of the year, but part and parcel to that, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Federal Budget Act of 2015 had an 85-line provision that was written in its entirety by bank lobbyists at Citigroup, Jamie Dimon in particular, that really drove this home. Is that correct? I mean, can we look at Jamie Dimon, for example, and say he's the guy, he's the man that's behind this, making us creditors?
I don't think you can actually lay it on one person's feet. I don't think you can do that. However, he is instrumental. I mean, he's the most powerful banker in the world. He's been labeled that, and he is a very smart man. I have to hats off to him. He's a very smart man. He was going to be a Treasury Secretary. At one point, he was on the short list. So, yes, I'm sure he has great influence into that, but he definitely is a big player there. But I don't know that you could lay it all at his feet. But all of the heads of all of the major top 5 banks would have input into that, and the Bankers Association, and all of that would have input.
Okay, and the last thing, very quickly, I just want to say that in our attempts to get a mortgage for our studio and to move fast, I up close and personal experienced the ramifications of the Dodd-Frank Act. I had what I believe was a financial colonoscopy done on me and Joe and I in our business. It's as if the Dodd-Frank Act or the collateral damage from that it was created to stifle any type of growth. I mean, it's almost impossible. The hurdles thrown against the average person to get ahead or to buy a studio. It's almost impossible. Combine that with the criminalization of cash. You can't even. If you're fortunate enough to have $5,000, we'll say, to put toward the deposit for a commercial building, you can't do that because they want to know where the $5,000 just came from. And if you say, "Well, I saved it, for the last 5 years," no, we're not going to take it because that could be laundered money. Yeah, it's just insane to me. I'm sorry. I just want to drive that point home. It's crazy to me.
Well, right. I don't disagree. I mean, it's the equivalent of Abu Ghraib treatment for the average person trying to get a loan. I mean, stand you on cold tile and strip you naked. And that's what it really feels like when you go through trying to get a loan and to look at every little thing. But what that is an overreaction to the previous style of doing business was what you just stated what your income is. There was no verification. You say, "Oh, I actually make $300,000 as a clerk at a 7-Eleven," and they would accept it, and then they would loan you the money. I mean, I know several case studies where people I know worked for the same bank I did. They were in a fairly low-paying job. I wouldn't say low, but I mean they made $30,000 or $40,000 a year for what they did, and they went to apply for a $550,000 mortgage. They went to a mortgage broker, and they put their real numbers on there, and the mortgage broker said, "Oh no, you can't put that. You need to put $450,000 because you're a team manager at a bank." They said okay, and the banks loaned them $550,000. Then the bottom fell out. They fortunately were able to sell their house before that happened, but had they not, the bank would have been on the hook for $500,000, and conceivably those people could have been prosecuted for mortgage fraud. It wasn't their necessarily doing, other than a sin of commission. I mean, a sin of actually just acquiescence. It was the mortgage broker trying to push it and he gets paid on the mortgage amount. So this whole Dodd-Frank, this whole thing of you going through the double-digit exam that you had to go through to get your loan is all based on, because this pendulum always swings 180 degrees to the other direction of where it was before when you're dealing with the government.
Gotcha.
So I feel for you, and you're not alone. I mean, credit scores and all of these things, it's making it very difficult for millennials especially to get loans, and that's why this country is becoming a 50% rental group, country, because nobody can buy a home. The American dream of owning a home is unreachable for many people. So that's why, and this is exactly why, because they made it so difficult because of the previous sins.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you for that. Go ahead, Steve. And Steve, I think you muted yourself accidentally there.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to cut off any kind of feedback. By the way, is my volume okay right now?
Super. Absolutely.
Okay. Right now, Ross, as we're on the air, I'm getting some emails coming in from one of my intercessor friends, and cyber thieves eyeing your bank balance. Just last year alone, 2.2 billion malicious attacks took place. 40% came for Russia alone, U.S. 39%. And the balance is other nations, China. But what they're claiming is that over $1 billion, that's 1,000 million, has been stolen. What the banks don't admit to, Doug, and to all the brothers and sisters out there listening, is the fact that they pay ransom secretly because they have their capital requirements. There's a whole list of things they've got to maintain. So the last thing anybody wants to know is Bank A, that's one of the top five, just paid, let's say, $100 million ransom. So one of the biggest things going on is that we're talking about this stuff, and as we're talking on the radio tonight, which is, for the record, May 13th, there are ongoing DNS attacks all over, and we're also seeing that basically they're claiming that Russian hackers, this is coming from Softpedia, are caught preparing large attack against financial institutions. Now, let me make this clear to everybody. We are at war. We are at war on so many fronts. The United States government is at war with its people. The Russians are tired of NATO and basically the U.S. initiating issues in the Ukraine. We all heard the State Department's lady spokesman saying that basically they started this whole thing. The peace when there is no peace. It's fascinating because what we're seeing now, and this is something that people don't understand, in the world of war, as I've read von Clausewitz on war, and I've had some really good tutors who are multi-star generals teach me how it works. But in anti-satellite warfare, the first thing that's going to come under attack are the eyes in the skies. We use satellites for communications. We use them for surveillance. We use them for controlling the troops. So people need to have indicators. What is there? And I will be blunt with you. And again, I speak for myself. Ross speaks for himself. But I would be terrified. I think the safest thing to have online banking. I understand convenience. If you want to, stay with your online banking, somebody will send me an email. Who are you to tell me to do that? I'm nobody to tell you to do that. I'm telling you that cyber attacks are escalating dramatically. And by the way, this is one of the things that the Russians have basically planned, and we got caught with our pants down. Now it seems like all the cyber attacks that are coming from the U.S. are being aimed at the alternative media. So, ladies and gentlemen, we don't get the privilege of talking like this much more in the future. And so the point that you've got to do is you've got to take control of your own money. I over the years of being in the precious metals business, Ross, and Doug and Joe, I'll share something with you. The thing that I've noticed the most is people will not take control of their funds because, number one, even people with great sums of money, to the majority that I've talked to over 25 years, and that's how long I've been in the precious metals business, longer than that, they don't want the responsibility for their own money. And so when you have that attitude, somebody will come in and say, I'll take your money. And again, this is why it becomes imperative that, well, the whole world of cyber attack, cyber assault, cyber warfare is geared against you. You have to become a hunter warrior in the way of protecting what you already have, capital preservation, and also you need to go on the offensive, and you can no longer sit back, think that somehow, you work hard, you put your money or it's deposited automatically in your account, and you're safe. That's absolutely the worst and most deadly assumption in the world. Now someone will say, well, I'm going to do it anyway. Fine. You obviously know that you've been warned, and you've been warned and warned and warned. So tonight we're going to give you in the second hour some practical things you can do. But I think it's important, ladies and gentlemen, because, when all of the different partnerships and trade agreements and tariff agreements, whether it was GATT, General Agreement on Trades and Tariffs, NAFTA, North American Free Trade Association. By the way, Ross Perot, and I won't go into great detail, but Ross Perot and his entire family were threatened that if he didn't pull out of the election, they'd all be murdered. I actually interviewed the man, I don't know how many years ago, but it must have been 7 or 8 years ago, that had a he was a man who was given a presidential letter and a get-out-of-jail free card. He was going to be the assassin, former intelligence guy. I brought him on the radio. I won't tell his name. Obviously, I know it. And because he said, no one will believe this, Steve, he did send me a copy. And unfortunately, Doug, I've moved. I had boxes of stuff shredded. I had, I think, 10 or 12 file cabinets, and that's gone. But, he's now resurfaced and special forces guy. So people have got to understand this is the dirtiest business in the world. It was Rothschild that said, give me control of a nation's money or a currency, and I care not who writes its laws. I came along and said this. I'm not in the same category, but I just said, he who controls the money controls your life. And, you've heard derivations of this statement, but this is one I wrote down today. You can ignore the facts, but you can't ignore the ramifications as they unfold before your eyes. So here's the deal. We live in such a state of denial. We live in such a state of mind-numbedness and total dumbness. I watched a lady today literally driving down the highway in the fast lane, probably doing 35 and everybody's doing 60, literally absorbed in, I never saw her head come up from, reading her text messages. Saw another guy walk into traffic the other day downtown Bozeman. Bozeman's notorious. Basically, our crosswalks become targets of opportunity. So I literally watched that happen. And what I'm saying tonight is I'm praying for everyone who's listening to us to get it, to absolutely get it. Now, let's just talk about the secrecy, Ross, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Share what's going on from your position and what you know has been told you from your background people.
Well, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is touted as being the greatest thing since NAFTA, and NAFTA wasn't all that great. NAFTA lost us hundreds of thousands of jobs, thousands of factories, and ruined a lot of people's lives, and not to mention billions upon billions of dollars of trade deficits. So if this one's magnitude greater than that, I'm really not looking forward to it too much. So it's shrouded in secrecy. Even the congressmen and senators have to go to a special room to view it section by section. Somebody sits in the room and watches them read it. They can't take notes. If they do, they have to turn them in and they're shredded. They're sworn to secrecy, and if they tell anybody what's part of it, then they can be put in jail and cited for contempt. If this is the most transparent regime that we're ever supposed to have, then this doesn't smell right. And so you have my people that I'm listening to said, they're concerned, does it have gun confiscation to part of the UN's small arms deal in it? Does it have the devaluation of the dollar or the replacement of the dollar? Does it include, how does it affect Jade Helm? Is that part of it? Because some things will come out. And there are even, I read over the weekend, there are companies that are selling stocks, or I guess you would call them puts, where you buy it for a penny, and if the Trans-Pacific Partnership actually gets approved by July 1st, they'll pay you $1. Otherwise, you will lose money. So there is more than that's seen by the eye, and my folks are telling me that it's not a good thing, because you see the political spectrum is completely on its head. You have Republicans supporting it, Democrats filibustering it yesterday. The Drudge had it as if it was dead. Now, 10 minutes before the show came on, now they're saying it's back live again because Harry Reid got what he wanted to vote on. So you have people in the Democratic Party actually embarrassing Caesar Obama and getting him all upset, and them threatening folks and just calling him all kinds of names in public speeches yesterday. So there's a huge political turmoil going on, so there must be something to do with jobs that has to do with our way of life, the dollar. All of these things are involved, and nobody really knows except the president and his trade group, and everybody's sworn to secrecy. They use it under the caveat of, well, we can't bring it public because if we tell Japan what we're doing with China or with Singapore or with other, they'll want the same deal. Well, then somebody's not being a good trade partner to me. So there's something is rotten in Denmark, to quote Shakespeare. So something is not right. And my folks just tell me that you need to be concerned about gun confiscation, or maybe as simple as registration. It could be elimination of assault rifles or alleged assault rifles like AR-15s. All of these things which would make you think, okay, what are they doing that's going to get the public so upset that they have to station all of this equipment around the country under the auspices of Jade Helm and say, don't worry about it, nothing to see here, move along. It's like these aren't the droids you're looking for type of thing, Jedi mind trick of Star Wars. And unfortunately, we don't fall for that. And so there's something dreadfully wrong. And if this thing comes to fruition in July, the reason I said these puts or these bets that they're placing for July 1st, because it directly coincides with Jade Helm. Again, as an intelligence officer in my background, I build this tapestry of information, and as you weave it all together, the threads blend and build a picture for you. So these things, taken individual stories at a time, wouldn't tell me anything. But you put them all again, and you see their tangential relationships, and you see how they all can interweave. It makes you just understand that it is not what it says it's going to be. And what is the timing? Why are there bets for July 1st? Why is Jade Helm July 15th? Why are what is all the immediacy of giving the president Caesar Obama, giving him the power to just have fast track and do whatever he wants? So without congressional oversight and without congressional having to vote on it. So are we making amendments? So these kind of things just trigger my spiritual insight and go, this is just not right. My spirit is all turned upside down over the last couple of weeks because of this. And the more I research it, the more I see that the things are coming to pass. And just as we talked about in April show of April 2nd, many of the things that we talked about are coming to pass there as well. So when we get to that, we can talk through that. But Steve, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is not a good thing for the average American. I can just tell you that. If it was, they would be singing it. They would be singing it from the West Wing in the balcony, screaming it like the Pope is giving his Easter homily.
Well, one of the things too that everyone should be upset about, to the point of being incredulous, and literally there should be a massive recall petition to every congressman and senator, you probably saw, Russ, Doug, and Joe, the fact that they claim that they cannot be charged now. They want to put a bill through that they are exempt from insider trading. This is such the fall of Rome. The Roman Senate, I'll say this, the United States Senate, the United States House of Representatives is as debauched as Rome was shortly before its fall. Just as the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, all of the different barbarians that ultimately took down Rome, obviously the church in the east, Constantinople, formed by Constantine, but we are seeing the total abrogation of law by those we elect to supposedly protect us from unjust laws. There is a dictatorship. It's already in the making. And by the way, I don't know if you saw this, Ross, and I don't know if you saw this, Doug and Joe, but another Morgan Stanley trader in Lake Ontario near Toronto's beach. And so, one of the things, calls buzz in while I'm on the radio. I can't shut that off. But it says this: police are awaiting the autopsy of Murray Abbott, and guess what his specialty was, okay? Now, what does this tell you, Ross Powell? Abbott was a vice president of the Capital Markets Group of Morgan Stanley's Canadian Wealth Management Division. When they whack somebody that is that big, you've got to understand, by knowing the division that they were over can lead you in the direction of who wanted them silenced. Are you aware of that death at all, Russ?
Yeah, I saw that right before coming onto the show, and again, capital markets, somebody that's involved in probably in the derivatives market, probably discovered some things. There's all kinds of things going on in the derivative markets that he may have come across something or made a bad trade or did something, and he was probably whacked for it. Since again, he was either going to blow the whistle or he made such an egregious mistake that they said, "Well, you're done."
Well, again, it's
if you're
the
in
long
asset management, you're probably in derivatives.
Yep. So derivatives is the biggest bubble in the world. And what's critical, Doug, for people to understand, and this is the thing, Ross, maybe you can say it clearer than I can, because I guess there have some who really get it. But when you have money in the bank, there is no money in the bank. You have electrons and you have photons on a cathode ray tube or whatever, the LED tube. There is no money. It is a functional cyber currency now. And because of, once you take cash out of the hands of people, you've divorced them from real money totally, and now they're in the quantum crook category. Now, that's my new term, Doug. That's a new Quayleism, as Hawk would call it, quantum crooks. Because if you notice everything, cyber this, cyber that, Bitcoin this, Batcoin that, the point that is so tragic is that Americans are literally selling their birthright out